what was monumental about how you managed us, and I say us because there was you had every demographic of engineer from a skill set perspective and just an age perspective, is that you treated us all the same. However, you also managed us differently to where our habits were. And to me, it was impressive how you just kept it all under control. And you as a person never changed. It was awesome. It was just
Well,
you
thank you.
knew what you were getting.
So you mean that as a compliment?
Yeah. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of The Wins and the Grind. I'm your co host, Esco. I have Lisa Tilt with me as always. And Lisa, this is going to be a fun one because in the past, when we've done our mentoring sessions, I always have this guy in the back of my head as I'm talking about my mentor did this and the guy I look up to did this. And every time I told those stories, 9 times out of 10, I was talking about Mike Foushee. Mike Foushee was a manager of mine in several different parts of my career. And also, I think Mike was one of those guys who saw the raw potential that is probably still raw potential and took advantage of it and gave me a whole bunch of chances. But man, he hit me over the back of the head a whole bunch of times too. So let's be honest, Mike was a great mentor, manager, and I just learned a whole bunch of stuff from him. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking
Welcome,
time out of
Mike.
your
Thank you.
beach week. Mike, I kind of want to share with Lisa your managing style, which was pretty unique. You told a lot of stories. Sometimes they were just stories in general, but a lot of times you told stories about accidents or mistakes that other people would make. And it
Yep.
was it was about listening to those stories that kind of helped you teach your lesson. What was it about storytelling, or why was it that you just kept on going with story after story after story to kind of teach the hard-headed guys, what's going on?
Well, for me, you know, stories was a way to communicate things that had happened to me in my career. So most of the folks on my team, were some exceptions, were a lot younger than me. So whether it's through a life experience with my family or something that happened to me when I was an individual contributor or as a manager, it's to me, hearing a story, hearing what happened and what the outcome was resonated more with individuals than just saying, I need you to make 5 sales calls a week.
Yeah.
Why do I need you to make 5 sales calls a week? Here's what happens if you do these type of activities and don't just go through the motions. So I would try to equate a real life story, something that happened where somebody became successful by doing certain things versus just being one of those guys that says, do this, do that, and not give you any background on why you're doing that and why it would help you. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, and again, this whole arc of the wonderful people that we're able to talk to in this series of storytelling and business, you've really kind of crystallized the crux of what we're talking about, right? That the piece where you're able to not just tell somebody to do something and even putting context around it is very different than telling sort of the why through an outcome of an
Yeah.
actual experience that you had. We connect as humans with through stories. We talk about that all the time. And then your ability, and Esco's talked about you for years, and I was so excited to finally meet you and have this conversation, and to hear the things that you found successful because I've seen it in the output of Esco. Thank you for making him the person that he is today. And so, of course, I joke, but um, I think that there's so much about stories building those relationships. So not only were you using it to manage somebody, but I mean, just even the connection that I've seen between you two, it built your connections and your relationships stronger. Can you talk about that and maybe ways that you felt that was important?
Yeah, I think it helps you build trust between the two when you can
Mm,
have we can tell those type of stories and build a trust, whether it's a coworker, it's an individual contributor, or even customers when you're telling these stories. What I have found is, you know, I could tell a story about something in my life that kind of equated to whatever they were talking about, and 9 times out of 10, next time I'd go see them, or a year from then when I'd go see them, they'd bring up that story. It
Mm.
built a bond, it built a relationship. So what I found was when I shared these type of things with my coworkers, with my employees, it made more of a stronger relationship between the two of us, and it built more of a trust because it felt like I was sharing something with them they felt like they could share with me now.
Hmm. I just a quick side note to that. It's interesting because, sorry, Esco, I'm just going to jump in here because sort of a take two is that I was thinking about sort of my business and marketing communications, what you guys focus on, and really, sales. And we meet a lot of people,
Mhm.
meet new people all the time. You think about even in a month, you think about a year, and then you stack about 3 decades plus worth of, relationships. And if I don't have a story connected with someone, they don't have as much sort of latency in my brain of how I even knew them. And I think what triggered that for me was when you said, I could see them a year later. And you think
Yep.
about what happens in the course of a year in business and who we're talking to, especially in our professions. And I'm with you. That resonated immediately with me because I have got this one story, this anchor point, and then you build from there. I love that.
Right. Right.
Interesting.
So when Mike and I would travel, it was, of course, I had to make X amount of sales calls per hour or something like that. It was something ridiculous that was lofty. And when you're coming into, a new guy entering into sales, especially field sales, and then you have a tenured guy like Mike who's been in the industry, you know, decades and decades of relationships. And you're like, I remember there was a conversation I had with Mike. I was like, I can't get that fifth meeting, for the week while I got you in town. And he goes, "Where are we gonna be?" And whatever, we were in some and he goes, "I got somebody." And, like, he'd pick up the phone and be able to grab a customer cold out of the blue and go visit with them. Mike, how did you keep those relationships up? Or did you actually? I mean, was it a, "Hey, I know I built rapport with this guy, I can get him on the phone," or was it, "Hey, I talk to my customers periodically"? How were you able to, take a new guy like me and just go, "Yep, I got our next meeting. Boom, let's do it."
Yep. So that's a great question. I'd mentioned before I was a customer for 14, 16 years before I jumped over to the other side of the fence. And I had certain vendors that called on me and stayed in touch with me and would come see me when I didn't have a deal on the table. They would stop by and check in. They didn't have to go buy me lunch or dinner or anything. They'd just call and say they were in town, want to see if I need anything. And those people are the people that typically got my business when I did have money and need to buy something. So what I learned, I said, well, now that I'm over on this side of the fence, as I would meet these customers, sometimes I would be in town meeting with somebody else. I'd call them and I'd say, hey, I'm in town. I'm going to be here 2 hours. Do you have time? If not, that's fine. When I was not on the road, if I didn't have anything going on, I'd go through something you probably have never heard of called a Rolodex.
Oh, great.
And
I
I would
appreciate
I
that
would
though.
call people up out of the blue and say, hey, I was just thinking about you. I'm gonna be in town in a month. I'm gonna be in town in 2 weeks. Just checking on you. How are you doing? In the last 2 weeks, I've been retired 2.5 years now. This weekend, I talked to the CIO of the University of Miami before their big ball game with Florida. I talked to our friend at SAS. NC State had a big ball game going. I've talked to my buddy at AutoZone. Even though I'm out of the game, I'm still connecting with those people. People call it networking. I call it relationship building, but I made a lot of friends with a lot of my customers. And the way I was able to do what you asked in a long, long answer was constantly staying in touch with them. So when I was close, I could pick up the phone and typically they would make time.
Mhm.
That's that people connection, Lisa. That's that people connection.
Gosh, and that's a point too, right? They're not connected to a product or service. They're connected with the human. I mean, they might need some. Yes, I need to find you know,
Widget.
a product to fill this or whatever. I need to, do marketing services.
Yep,
But even beyond that, like also too, like they're going to stay for the relationship
that's right.
too, unless your product or service completely fails. I mean, of course, there's like things, but when we talk about, they're kind of buying into the relationship first, or, I would say. So how do you even mentor your folks and
Ooh,
coach the
good
folks
question.
on your team to say, "Don't go in product first." How you'll get there. How do
You'll
you
get there.
give them and coach them on even having the patience, right?
Yeah. So for me, what was interesting, I had a technical background. I went into engineering and then management, sales engineering. And what I found when I was an engineer in the beginning, when I went over to sales engineering, is I could go to a town and call on a customer and take 8 or 10 of their engineers out to lunch. And what I found was I didn't even have to bring up business.
Mm.
We could be sitting there talking, and they almost felt like they needed to bring something up.
Great call. Just had one of those lunches yesterday.
So the point was just continue to go see them, continue to talk to them. For me, face to face is best. Phone is second best. Text is like, if that's the only way, okay. But what I learned was just by staying in front of them, setting a schedule, saying I'll be here every 2 weeks on this day. Then you get to that point to where you can drop by and say, "Hey, I just showed up into town, got some extra time," and you can get in to see him. So the way I position that to the engineers, a lot of them didn't have a sales background. They don't want to cold call. They don't know how to cold call. And I said, just build a relationship. You'll find you'll build a friendship, and 9 times out of 10, they're going to bring up business before you do.
Yeah.
So just go build that relationship. Um, I would travel with them. That's the other thing too. I wouldn't send them out in a car by themselves. If they didn't feel comfortable with it, I'd say, "Come on, I'll go with you." And most of the accounts I had throughout my career, I already had relationships and I could make that initial introduction and get them started.
See, that was the win for me, Mike, is that you just had so much tenure and you were approachable. And I think, yeah, you picked on me. I probably deserved it, but yeah, you picked on me. But here's the thing is that you knew me, you knew how to coach me and so on and so forth. To me, that was the win up for me about how you went into managing, a guy like me and shaping me to put those good habits in place, so that way you could team me up for success. And I so much appreciated that. But Mike, the other thing that you do that is to this day, you still do this. You coached me, you managed me, you were my boss, you mentored me on, on and off the sales field, but you also ask about my family. You always ask about my kids and my wife. And it's like, I still remember the time when how old are they now? Every time we get on the phone, even today, you're
Yeah.
still asking those types of questions. I get a feeling, or I get the sense that this comes from you. This comes from just you, the way you are as a person, or is it something that you have to do to maintain these relationships?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I do it because I have to do it. I do it because I really, really care about you and your family and everybody who worked for me. And I learned that from probably the best boss I ever had was when I was working at Motorola back in the mid '80s to late '90s, and I had a boss that was very unique. He was really hands off. He trusted me to do my job. He even told me one time he was going to give me the opportunity to fail, which scared the crap out of me. But he said, "But that means I'm giving you the opportunity to be successful." So I ended up running a data center for that division of Motorola, working for this gentleman. He would invite me to bring my young children over to his house. He had a pond, let them fish in his pond. He and his wife, anytime we would see him, would always ask about our kids at work. He would ask if I needed to get off to go do something with the kid. He was more than happy to let me do it. Just a great individual. And I really felt like, and he did, he really cared about me and my family and how we were doing. And I learned from that it's very important, not only worker coworker, but uh, or worker employee, anybody you work with. I've always done that.
Mm. Yeah, and Eska, you talked about your win, and that leads me to sort of the grind, which to me isn't a bad grind, but more of about grit, I would say, because relationships take time
Yeah.
to build. And all three of us have over the course of our whole careers. right? And you, as we all know, you get out of a relationship what you put into it. And I
Right.
think we always have to be reminded, especially when I'm thinking about these younger generations, when text is electronic communication is the first, second, and third choice of communication, and versus
I know, and my kids, it's
virtual.
like I call them and they won't answer their phone, but you text them and they respond.
There
Makes
you
me
go.
so mad. God,
Yeah,
it
and
makes
then
me
it's the reverse, and I get mom, 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 3 texts later, mom. I'm like, "Yes, my darling dearest, what can I do for you?" But to your point, like, how would you say that I mean, it's also the relationships that make me the most fulfilling in my career, right? And I don't know, that's why I kinda throw it into the grind category. I'd love to hear from both of you, but why I have a caveat, it's my favorite part, but I sort of worry about the state of relationship and business, if I'm being honest.
yeah. Well, probably shouldn't tell this story, but I'll tell it anyway.
Yes, sir.
That's
Uh,
the whole
so,
reason we're together is to tell stories, Mike.
I mean, there's always gonna be some things that you have to do the job. You know, the newer generation, they communicate in a different way. Sometimes they dress in a different way, but I'd hired this young man to work for me. And part of what I asked him to do for the first 2 weeks was go look at our product set, go study it. I set him up with one of my better engineers to teach him how to present the products. And I said, I'm gonna meet with you in Atlanta in 2 weeks. 2 weeks come by. I set the stage ahead of time. I'm gonna be the CIO of a company, of a large healthcare company. You're gonna be presenting to me, not to a bunch of engineers. So you need to take it up a notch. I don't care about the bits and bytes and how fast a fan spins. Okay. I want you to talk to me about your product set on a level around how it's going to save me money and what the TCO and ROI will be. So I go into this meeting. I got on a suit and tie training session. This gentleman walks in. He's got on khaki pants, shoes, no socks, and a short sleeve collarless shirt. So I let him go through the whole presentation and I asked him a few questions. And at the end, I said, all right, I just got one more question. He said, yes, sir. I said, where'd you get those socks at? He said, I don't wear socks. And I said, you do now. Go to Walmart and buy you 4 or 5 pair and don't ever show up for a meeting again without them.
And that's Mike being nice, Lisa. I will tell you, there were obviously Mike is from Alabama. There were a lot more colorful words that he usually inserted in there. But in Mike's defense, here's the thing. Mike had a couple rules. Dress was huge. And so when I was coming up, I was on the inside and I was coming out to the field, and we were covering healthcare at the time. And at that time when I was in the field, everyone in a hospital wore a tie. Everyone.
Yeah.
And so, Mike was insistent. You wear a tie, you wear a tie, you wear a tie, you wear a tie. And I remember one time I flew into Tampa and picked him up, or he picked me up, or whatever, and we both have our ties on, or he's about to get his put on, and then we're meeting with another partner to sell to the hospital in question, and none of them had ties on. And Mike looks at me and he, take off your, and he's getting mad because the people we were going to present with, it was a multi-million-dollar deal, and they didn't have a tie. So Mike had to break one of his own rules. The other rule, Mike, and I use this to this day, by the way, Mike had another rule. If it takes 2 emails or 2 texts, as we were starting to get into when Mike and I were working with each other, if it took 2 texts, the third thing is a phone call.
Yeah.
Always,
Yeah.
always. And he kind of summed it up in this way. If you're not able to communicate or get the point across within that short amount of time, pick up the phone and have a conversation with the person. And, those kind of 2 rules right there are things that I've kept to heart, Mike, since we were together, man. And it works. It has
Well, and
proved me
dress
well.
code may have fallen out in these days, but I was always taught you dress one piece of clothing better than your customer. So
Right.
Same.
if
Yeah.
they're in dress pants and a jacket, you wear a tie. If they're in dress pants, you can just get away with a sports coat or something.
Right. Right.
But for me, and it depends on who you're meeting with. If you're meeting with a C-level type person, for me, it was always showing a sign of respect. Don't walk in there looking like you just came off the farm if he's in a 3-piece suit. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, this is kind of why I was so bullish in series 1 when we started talking about your brand. And your brand right here in this box as we're talking about it, it was because my mentor etched in my brain that you're going to dress a certain way. And I think in today's world, it's transitioned into the brand that you carry as you're having these types of discussions with people.
Yeah, it is. And why it carries such weight because, and again, I do want to go back and say it doesn't mean that, even what I said, younger generations aren't, it's not like they can't make relationships, but it's different.
Right.
It
And
is
Right.
different, right?
exactly to your point, and what we've been talking about, this is now how to make the relationship happen.
Yep.
And so how you show up, things like being punctual and not having other screens open and not
Yep.
having distractions in ways that you're like, okay, I have to bring myself to be just as focused in the conversation as if you were right here in front of me in person. And sometimes it's hard if you're on the screen all day. I mean, there were things that came out with video conferencing and the exhaustive nature of being on a video all day, even more so than being in person, because then you're trying to glean a lot of information that you just have as nonverbal cues if you were in
Yep.
person.
Yep.
We've started to flex that muscle just being 5 years so much into this, but to your point, it's in this box, how are we showing up and what are we saying and how are we saying it? Do we feel just as engaged as we would in any other kind of conversation? So
It's
that
really
is your
hard to
brand.
tell. Yeah, it's hard to tell these
Mhm.
days. When we're on and we got our cameras on, we can see each other. But on a lot of the Zoom calls, people turn their camera off. You don't
Mhm.
know if you're doing a presentation, you can't read the room like when you're sitting in a meeting with people. That's one of the things I always enjoy doing with my people travel. Read the room, see if what Esco's telling them means anything to them. You can tell. There's tells. They get their phone out. They start looking at their email, or they're not. They raise their laptops. That's hard to do with today's technology because a lot of people just turn their cameras off, and you don't know if they're paying attention or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, camera off is the equivalent of somebody on my team was like, "We have a conference call today." Like an actual conference call. Like, I haven't had a conference call in 5 years. I don't even know what to do with that. And it was actually rather amusing because I was like, "You're all just gonna be on the phone like this?"
Oh, wait, no camera? It wasn't like a Zoom or a
No,
Teams or anything
it
like
was
it,
they
it was a
would think of
oh,
7 years
oh,
ago when we were like, "I'm gonna get on a conference call," because that's what you did. Everybody was on the phone, and it just is almost a foreign concept because we do have Esco and I have talked about this for years. Cameras on or else it's a whole different kind of
Yeah,
engagement, right? There is
right.
there isn't much of it. And reading the
There,
room, Mike, geez, that is
yeah.
important.
It's you can't read the room. There's one thing that used to really aggravate me about conference calls or people with their camera off is you'd ask them a question and they'd come back on and they would say their response was, "Could you repeat the
Did
question? I
you
had you
repeat
on
the
mute."
question? I knew that was
And it's
like,
like,
clearly you're not paying
I told a
attention.
person one day, I said, "Mute means I can't hear your ass. That doesn't mean you can't hear me."
Amen, brother.
So, Mike, in series 3, we talked about how we interacted with some of the newer generation, brand new to work, and so on and so forth. And of course, the previous series were all about kind of the pits, the pits and the stops, or the fits and the stops that Lisa and I had as we were building our
Mhm.
brands and our careers. What advice do you have for a seller today? Let's just say they found out you've been a sales guy for decades, and they like, Mike, how can I be successful today? Give me 2 tidbits of how I can be successful.
In selling, I would probably turn that around and say, "What are you doing today?" to make sure I don't tell them to do something they're already doing. And then if they weren't doing some of those things, it would be one, understand, you need to learn your customer base. You need to get as high in the organization as you can and build those relationships with your customers is the first thing. The second thing that I learned as an engineer with the storage company was learn as much as you can about your customer's company and what they're doing. Read their 10Ks, read their annual statements, understand what are their plans for the next 12 to 18 months, and then try to meet with the people that you can tie what we have to do as a company to what their objectives are.
Yeah.
That's a long lost art that people don't do these days. You don't look at the company and what the company's trying to do. I was involved in several deals over my career where we read the annual report. One was a company called SCI. They had no debt. Their stock was in the toilet. They were just like the original Wall Street movie. They were worth more in pieces than they were as a whole. We walked right into the CIO and said, "I'm going to help you acquire some debt. You need to acquire some debt. Here's what we're going to do." We revamped their whole data center. We leased it to them. They spent $3 or $4 million, which was a lot back in 1999. We actually helped them with some of our partners to buy some additional property to build some additional factories.
Oh, wow.
And they came out of it smelling like a rose. They didn't get bought out by, the Gordon Gekko at the time, whoever that was. But understanding what they were trying to do as a company was very, very important. I think a lot of times as a salesperson, you've got this bag of tricks and you just run in there and you throw stuff against the wall, hoping something will stick without understanding what the company's trying to do.
Yeah.
So those two things.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think that is, so you talk about 1999 and before that, there's really no excuse with Googling.
Oh,
Like,
I know.
there,
It,
you can
back
spend
then, it was
5
hard to
minutes.
get that information.
Absolutely. And if you
Yeah,
don't
you had to
even spend 5
subscribe
minutes,
to something to get it. You couldn't just do it on your phone.
Yeah.
Or your BlackBerry or whatever it was we had back then.
Lisa, it's surrounding myself with guys like this that brought me
yeah,
to the part of my career that I'm at right now. Mike. Thanks for spending time with us. Really, really do appreciate it. Lisa, you got to meet my mentor, Mike Foushee, and this was another great storytelling session here in Series 4 of the Wins in the Grind. Tune into our other episodes, Series 4. It's good. Bye,
yeah.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.